evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Kate Brown was first elected governor of Oregon way back in 2015. At the time, there was not a whole lot going on in Oregon, so voters didn't ask many questions. The one thing they did learn about Kate Brown over and over again is that she is a self-described bisexual. Why is this relevant? Well, the media didn't explain. They told us, without exactly explaining what it meant, that this fact was historic and it was highly thrilling. Kate Brown's sex life was shattering ceilings. Woohoo! And yet, if you looked a little closer, you noticed something a little weird. Actually, Kate Brown was married to a man. Yes, he had a different last name, but he was still, as they say on TikTok, binary. He was a dude. That's fine, of course, but it was also a little confusing. How does having a groom at her wedding make Kate Brown an official member of the LGBTQ exclamation point community? No one bothered to ask. That kind of curiosity was forbidden. It was like wondering why we don't call Barack Obama half white, which he is. It's not allowed. Stop with the questions. Celebrate. So voters in Oregon dutifully celebrated. And then out from under them, the world changed. Suddenly, things in America went from placid to highly turbulent. That was especially true in Oregon, where there was rioting by left-wing militia that went on for more than a year. The state's biggest city was destroyed. People died. And then a virus arrived from China, and it killed thousands. It was a very serious moment. Unfortunately, Oregon did not have a very serious leader. It had some dopey soccer mom who got elected because she claimed she had a girlfriend in college. Kate Brown, unfortunately, turned out to be lighter than air. She didn't know anything. She had no achievements. Under pressure, she wilted and became irrational. She was exactly the leader you do not want in a crisis. And yet she was the governor, which in the age of Corona made her very close to God. And she acted like it. Here is Kate Brown commanding Oregonians to stop going outside without their little masks on, even if they've been vaccinated.
Today, I'm announcing that effective Friday, August 27th, masks will be required in all public outdoor settings where physical distancing is not possible, regardless of vaccination status. In addition, the Oregon Health Authority strongly recommends masking in outdoor gatherings at private residences where people from different households do not maintain physical distance.
At this point, it's almost pointless to apply the traditional measures of logic, reason, and data to decrees like that one. She's bisexual. It's cool. The power-mad hypocrites who think these decrees up don't care what the facts are. But since we are old school that way, we will try it one last time. Kate Brown's decree is nonsensical. First off, if the vaccines work, then why are vaccinated people required to wear masks? And for that matter, why is anyone required to wear a mask outdoors? Outdoor transmission of COVID is so rare that it's practically non-existent. That is true whether or not you have been vaccinated. As Mark Lipsitch, an epidemiologist at Harvard, pointed out this spring, quote, outdoor masking has notable costs and really no evidence of benefits, end quote, and that remains true tonight. Even Tony Fauci, who ordinarily only tells the truth in private emails, admitted the same thing in public. Quote, it's pretty common sense now that outdoor risks is really, really quite low, Fauci said. And a recent study from Ireland, among others, confirms that this is true. Researchers there considered more than 230,000 COVID cases in Ireland through March of this year. What did they find? They found that only 1 in 1,000 could be traced to outdoor transmission. So, as a factual matter, Kate Brown's order is absurd. But even if you ignored the science, even if you convinced yourself that large numbers of people were catching COVID while jogging, you still wouldn't make people wear masks. Because drugstore masks, the kind that everyone wears, do not work. Cloth and surgical masks do not stop COVID. That's not a guess. We know. A new study from engineers at the University of Waterloo, for example, just came out this week, once again proves that conclusively. The researchers used a mannequin to simulate someone seated in a large room. Some mannequins had common cloth masks. Others had the blue surgical masks that you see everywhere. What did they find? They found that aerosol droplets big enough to contain COVID built up on the mannequins as if the mask wasn't even there. The mask only filtered about 10% of the aerosol droplets. 90% got through. So on every level, the order you just saw from Kate Brown is ridiculous. And yet, Thanks to COVID, as we noted, she is now God, so her orders are now the law, and if you ignore them, you will go to jail.
Do you want people calling the police on their neighbors, not emergency lines or 911?
Look, this is no different than what happens if there's a party down the street and it's keeping everyone awake. What do neighbors do? They call law enforcement because it's too noisy.
That could be a yes.
Yes, yes.
So you call the cops. Of course, you call the cops. None of the actual laws are being enforced, but the fake laws, not the ones passed by the legislature, the ones made up by the power-mad governor, those will be enforced with guns. This is happening all over the country. In California, a state where identity is also more important than competence, one charter school just went into a lockdown. Police swarmed the campus. Why? Was there a mass shooting, a terror incident? No. Two siblings came to school without masks, so they called the SWAT team.
It was a tense first day of class at Springs Charter School in Temecula. Police were called on campus. The entire school went into lockdown, and all because two students refused to wear a mask. Victoria Nelson's a junior at the school. Her brother Drew is a senior. The siblings say they chose not to wear a mask for religious reasons, believing it would be enough to exempt them from the state mandate, even though no one filed any requests with the district or the school. The administrators say Victoria refused to wear a mask or leave class, and that's when we're told the situation escalated. Listen to what the principal tells her.
I need you to stand up, or we will have to physically remove you from this classroom. You cannot touch me.
Eventually, deputies showed up. The entire school was placed on lockdown, and both students were banned from going to that charter school ever again.
Oh, they can't go to school ever again. We're going to have the police beat you if you don't leave. That's what the principal just said. There's no evidence that the mask they're being told to wear will protect them. How many healthy school-age kids have died of COVID? Oh, sorry, that's actual science, no longer allowed. What's interesting is that as we call the cops on children and threaten to hurt them if they don't leave immediately and never get educated again, there are an awful lot of people who are actually dying of COVID. Thousands and thousands of elderly people have died of COVID in this country. No one seems to care about the actual deaths, particularly the deaths caused by the poor decision-making of Democratic governors, particularly in the state of New York. Today we learned that Andrew Cuomo was lying about how many nursing home patients he killed in New York. It turns out the total number of COVID deaths in the state was about 12,000 more than he said it was. 12,000. 12,000? It's not a small number. Why didn't we know that until today? Think about that. If they can lie about the number of people who died to the tune of 12,000 people, that's a huge problem. You can't make rational decisions about public health unless you have real numbers. How can you determine whether mandatory vaccinations are a good idea, for example? Unless you have accurate numbers. But we don't have accurate numbers. Politicians are lying about them and have from day one. But nobody cares. So watch the Pentagon press secretary explain today that all American soldiers, young and healthy, virtually every one of them, nevertheless, must be vaccinated immediately, whether or not they want or need the shot. Now, this has been done before. The last time the Pentagon forced troops to take a vaccine, that was the anthrax vaccine during the Iraq War, it was a disaster. It led to serious side effects, including death, and the military had to abandon it. But don't worry, says John Curry. Mandatory vaccines may not be necessary, but they're orders, and those orders are lawful.
Once you mandate it, as we've done, it's a lawful order. It's a lawful order. And we fully anticipate that our troops are going to follow lawful orders. And when you raise your right hand and you take that oath, that's what you agree to do.
Kind of missing the point, no? Shouldn't they be explaining to us slowly and in ways that we can understand, because it is, after all, a democracy, why this is a good idea? Showing us the data that justify this decision, explaining what the exemptions might be, telling us how long this is going to go on, and what we're going to get out of it in the end, because all of this is being done on our behalf, for our benefit, right? That's why the U.S. government exists, to help us. They don't even mention any of that. His response was, we have the power to do this, and we're gonna. That's what Joe Biden just said, too. He just announced yesterday that everybody in America should be forced to take the vaccine, and then an undetermined number of booster shots from now until forever, regardless of their age or their health status or their religious beliefs, or whether critically they have active antibodies or not, whether they've had COVID already and recovered. It doesn't matter your individual circumstances. One size fits 340 million Americans. That's the plan. So Biden just ordered private business to compel employees to get vaccinated.
If you're a business leader, a nonprofit leader, a state or local leader who has been waiting for full FDA approval to require vaccinations, I call on you now to do that. Require it. Do what I did last month. Require your employees to get vaccinated or face strict requirements.
So the guy who planned the withdrawal from Afghanistan is now in charge of our vaccine policy. Some people clearly should get vaccinated. They're at risk. The benefits outweigh the risks of the vaccine for them. Other people probably shouldn't. Not everybody is identical. But it doesn't matter because force is their only response. The CEO of Delta, Ed Bastian, just announced today he's going to be working as Biden's enforcer to make everybody do it. Bastian announced that unvaccinated Delta employees will be fined hundreds of dollars every month. This surcharge will be necessary to address the financial risk the decision not to vaccinate is creating for our company, Bastian wrote. Oh, but this only applies to COVID. Notice there's no other illness, not type 2 diabetes, not HIV, not hepatitis. All of those diseases are widespread. All of them cost a lot of money. But Delta isn't forcing anyone to address those, just COVID, because the president has commanded it. Okay. Is this a good idea? Are the vaccines working in the way they promised they would? Again, it's not an argument against vaccines or even this one. It's an argument in favor of transparency and knowing what the data actually say before you obey. If you're interested, you should take a look at what's happening in Israel. Researchers there are giving us some answers to those questions. Keep in mind, Israel is one of the most vaccinated countries on the planet. More than 80% of Israeli citizens over the age of 12 are now fully vaccinated against COVID. So this summer, famously, Israel lifted its lockdowns because people weren't getting sick anymore. But now they are getting sick. Israel has one of the highest daily COVID infection rates in the entire world. It's averaging 7,500 confirmed cases a day. That's twice the number from just last week. What is going on here? There were nearly 10,000 cases diagnosed yesterday alone. Hundreds of people have died this month, vaccinated people. So what is that? Again, it doesn't mean vaccines are bad. It means we need an explanation for what's going on. Why aren't we demanding one? There are signs that vaccines in this country, too, are not working in the way that we were told they were, and probably, honestly, in the way that scientists thought that they would. According to the CDC, the effectiveness of the vaccines has now dropped to 66% for frontline workers. That's down from 90%. Why is that? Can we get an explanation, please? Tony Fauci won't give an explanation. He's just telling everyone to get the vaccine and then life will return to normal. Maybe, if you're lucky, in about a year or so-ish.
If we can get through this winter and get really the majority, overwhelming majority of the 90 million people who have not been vaccinated, I hope we could start to get some good control in the spring of 2022.
So 15 days to slow the spread, right? Okay, so now it's wear a burqa and get a jab every 6 months in perpetuity. Someone needs to explain what's going on slowly, carefully, with data. It's not enough to watch people who believe men can get pregnant tell us that they understand the science and we don't, and shut up and obey. That's not enough, not in a democracy, which we're hoping this still is. Victor Davis Hanson is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. He joins us tonight. Professor, thanks so much for coming on. Simple question. Again, not an argument against the vaccines, an argument for honesty and transparency. Why is no one standing up and speaking to us as adults in explaining why these mandates are being handed down and the benefits to us of handing them down? I haven't heard one person do that.
I haven't either. I think it's analogous to Afghanistan. The reason people don't believe the Biden press conferences about Afghanistan, he's not telling the truth. And they treat us like children. I got vaxxed. I support vaccination. My family got vaxxed. But let's be honest, about 50% of the people get a slight chills. They get fever. It's a discomfort. Tell us about it. But from the get-go, Tucker, we were never told that there was a lab connection. There was a likelihood, a strong possibility of an engineered virus. There was even a more bizarre likelihood that members of our own National Institute of Health had subsidized that gain-of-function research. And then we had this platonic noble lie from Dr. Fauci. Mask, no mask. Travel bans good, travel bans bad. Herd immunity, 60, 70, 80, 90. The vaccination, don't worry about other people, just worry about yourself, because once you get it, you got 96% immunity. You don't worry about other people. And then they weaponize it. They said this particular racial group, i.e. white people and Trump supporters, are derelict. They're endangering us all. I think the former CIA director said, send them to Afghanistan if they're not going to get vaxxed. When the actual data showed that Latinos and African Americans had a lower percentage of their demographies getting vaccinated. And then we were told, you know, it's herd immunity, acquired immunity. That's not the same as vaccination, even though that there were all of these doctors at research institutions saying, you know what, more or less, if you've had COVID, you have about analogous immunity to the vaccinated people. But we never took certificates from them and said, these are equal to vaccination. And the result of all of that was, and the World Health Organization, just to add that in, they were a Chinese megaphone. So at the end of all of this, people didn't believe the government. And one of the reaction was, I don't believe what they're telling us about the vaccination. So we need to get back and just be honest. People are members of an adult consensual society. They're voters. They're autonomous citizens. They can make these decisions. If you say, you know what, it's not the end of the world. We're going to live with this just like we do with the flu. Here are protocols you can take. We've never had a national protocol where a doctor stood up and said, you know what, these are off-label drugs. They may or may not work, but they're not going to hurt you, and that there's some evidence that they help you, whether it's Pepcid or vitamin D or quercetin or hydroxychloroquine. It's not, don't demonize these things. And then we can say, if you have acquired immunity, you're going to be about as safe probably as somebody that's vaccination. Don't demonize those people. And then we're going to say there's only bad and worse choices. If you are going to lock down the economy and lock down social intercourse, there's going to be psychological, economic, social, political, cultural damage. I think a lot of the mass hysteria and collective madness that we witness is a symptom of putting people in small, confined quarters without interaction with other citizens. That made them very prone to the messages they got on their computers, and their television sets were not accurate. And then finally, let's not demonize Texas and Florida as if they're the bad guys all of a sudden. Let's just look at the data. Deaths per million is the most accurate assessment of how a state does, and they have fewer deaths per million than does sophisticated eastern states like New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. And they're comparable here to California, but there's one difference. Their economies are far more robust, and their kids are in school, and they're not suffering the long-term damages that other states have inflicted upon themselves. So it's a real world, and there's never, this is perfect and this is bad, but we can't tell you the truth. It's bad choices versus worse choices. You're an informed citizen. Here's the data. We trust you to do it. And finally, I get really upset at Joe Biden, not because of political reasons, but no one talked down vaccinations more than did candidate Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. She said explicitly, if this vaccination is connected with Donald Trump, I don't want it. That did a lot of damage. So we don't need lectures from this administration when they found it politically useful to say and do the opposite of what they're now preaching.
I'm glad that you remember that.
More transparency, more honesty, and more confidence in the American citizen.
It's Animal Farm every day. I think that every day. Victor Davis Hanson, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So within the last hour, the Biden administration just issued an emergency alert to American citizens outside the airport in Kabul. It tells Americans to go home and follow the guidance of, quote, local authorities. That means the Taliban. Right now, Eric Prince, the founder of the private military company Blackwater, is in Afghanistan doing what the Biden administration has not done. He's helping get U.S. citizens out. He's been doing this for a while. In 2008, Eric Prince helped several Democratic Party VIPs, including Joe Biden, escape the country. Eric Prince joins us in a moment.
So they were on a congressional visit to Afghanistan in the winter, and their U.S. Army helicopter got lost in a blinding snowstorm and set down in Taliban territory on the side of a mountain. And the U.S. military launched a ground convoy to get them, and they got lost. And the Blackwater guys launched, and they did not get lost, and we recovered them. We rescued them from Taliban territory. I think that was the winter of '08.
You rescued Joe Biden and John Kerry and Chuck Hagel.
Great so.
Are they grateful?
You wouldn't think so, no.
Funded nonprofits in Washington, some of them that call themselves conservative, that have taken an awful lot of money from big tech. Now, one of the groups we mentioned last night is the Heritage Foundation, which may be the biggest conservative foundation in Washington. A lot of nice people there, a lot of conservatives there. The leadership, however, has made some decisions that we thought you ought to know about. After our segment aired last night, the Heritage Foundation informed us they were very upset by it. They pointed out that at some point last year, long after it became clear that big tech was systematically silencing their donors, was crushing conservatives, they had pledged not to take any more money from big tech. So they demanded that we issue a retraction, but not so fast. Actually, our segment was accurate. Public reports show that the Heritage Foundation received more than $1.6 million from Google and Facebook in recent years. We asked Heritage today the obvious question: will you return the money, all of it? Well, they didn't say, and that, of course, means no. So you have to ask yourself, what exactly did that money buy? Now, we can't tell you with any precision. We do know, and we don't think it's accidental, Heritage has been remarkably supportive of big tech's agenda in recent years for a conservative foundation. It's a little striking. In 2019, for example, a fellow at Heritage called Diane Katz attacked Senator Josh Hawley's proposal to rein in internet censorship. She said that systemic bias in Silicon Valley against conservatives, quote, has not been proven. Yeah, it's just a myth. In another Heritage analysis, Katz declared that breaking up big tech companies, quote, should be rejected. And that's just what they're saying in public. This show has been told that in 2019, just a couple of years ago, the Trump administration approached the policy experts at Heritage and asked them to support in public an effort to stop abuses by big tech. But Heritage refused and rebuffed the administration. They explained the free market would solve the problem. Build your own Google. What they didn't say is that the free market in this case involved getting $1.6 million from the tech companies. Now we know that happened, and we thought you should know. So a lot of Californians are enthusiastic about the possibility that they may be able to recall their governor, Gavin Newsom, because he's wrecking the state. How enthusiastic are they? Well, even the gate agents at one of California's airports appear to be on board with the recall. Watch.
Delta Airlines is paging recall Newsom. Please meet your party at Concourse A, Gate 25. Delta Airlines is paging recall Newsom. Please meet your party at Concourse A, Gate 25.
So it's not even a partisan point. Gavin Newsom is a terrible governor. Not saying he's a terrible person, maybe a great person. But look at the state he leads. It's gotten demonstrably, visibly worse by every measure during the years he has led it. So he's doing a terrible job. So you'd think even leaders of the Democratic Party, his party, would be very happy that he could be leaving. But they're not. They're doing everything they can to keep him in office. They're going so far as to endorse the job he's doing, if you can imagine. Imagine the bile they have to swallow to do that, because they're not blind. They see what he's done. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are now set to campaign against the recall. No more democracy for you. You got to wonder, will the state survive this? Will there be a free and fair election? Everyone's watching. Harmeet Dillon is the co-chair of the Republican National Lawyers Association. She lives in California. She has for many years. We're happy to have her on tonight. Harmeet, thanks so much for coming on. California does not get the credit it deserves for the corruption that's endemic there. It's a one-party state, and they act like it. And you've got to have concerns about whether this recall election will be free and fair. Are you concerned?
Well, of course I'm concerned, Tucker. I'm involved in election integrity efforts throughout the United States, and I'm also a member of the Republican National Committee. So we have a team of lawyers that is ready to deploy throughout the state here, and we are monitoring things every single day. Just a couple of hours ago, I filed a lawsuit to intervene in a challenge to the constitutionality of the recall statute because, frankly, I don't trust the Secretary of State or the Attorney General, who are both appointed by the governor, to defend him in this regard. And so we are going to be jumping on every potential opportunity to do that and fight back against the Democrats. Of course, they are playing fast and loose. We've seen some very alarming scenes of 300 ballots bundled together in the car of a person with a gun and some drugs. And so we are definitely looking into all of these issues. But Tucker, ultimately, it's going to come down to how much do people want a change in California? And I can tell you, even living in my latte-sipping, avocado toast eating, Lululemon wearing neighborhood in San Francisco, people are fed up with the crime, the drugs, the homelessness, the intermittent electricity, and everything else that is wrong with California. So people want to change here.
It's just not working. And this really is a test of whether our system works. I mean, can people get better leadership? That's kind of the question. Will there be election observers on the scene so the rest of us can know this was fair?
Well, 100%. The problem in California is that the voting doesn't just take place on election day like it would in a normal place. It's taking place now on a rolling basis through mail-in voting. It's 100% mail-in ballots this time around. And it is going to take place for 30 days after the election if it's close, because they have 30 days to count the vote. That's 60 days of voting. And of course, a lot of shenanigans can occur and ballots can disappear. So we are going to be observing it very closely and demanding accountability and filing lawsuits wherever we need to hold the Democrats accountable, because we cannot trust them.
Yeah, I hope so. People want to believe the system works, that it's real, that they have power, that their vote matters. So I appreciate what you're doing. Harmeet Dillon, thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
So Eric Swalwell had a very unusual, in fact, a stomach-turning sexual relationship with a Chinese spy, but he's still at large tonight. What's he doing? We've been keeping tabs on what Eric Swalwell is doing. We've got some disturbing news for you next. Our southern border remains wide open tonight. I want to tell you about a disturbing discovery that was just made there. Our Bill Malugin is at the border with that story. Hey, Bill.
Hey, Tucker, good to see you. So look, throughout this border crisis, cartel members and human smugglers have gotten increasingly bold and increasingly creative, if you will, with their efforts to avoid law enforcement. We got something pretty bizarre we want to show you. Take a look at this photo right here. It looks like a legitimate, average Border Patrol SUV, right? Well, it's not. It's a total fake. Border Patrol in Tucson, Arizona came across this vehicle being driven by a human smuggler. He had literally cloned one of their Border Patrol SUVs, got all the markings on it to make it look legit. He was also wearing a fake Border Patrol uniform and had 10 illegal immigrants inside that vehicle with him who he was smuggling. Thankfully, agents sniffed it out. They arrested him, took all of the migrants into custody. But that's the sort of thing happening down here at the border more and more often. You take a live look at our Fox drone overhead right now. Typical night down here in southern Texas. We got a group of migrants who have just shown up after crossing illegally into the United States. This happens every single night out here. The question is, who are all of the people coming over? Border Patrol here in the Rio Grande Valley reporting in the last fiscal year, they've already arrested 145 confirmed gang members, including 4 MS-13 members just in recent days. This crisis not going away anytime soon, as the Biden administration has 2 crises they're dealing with, one in the Middle East, the other right here at the southern border, which isn't slowing down anytime soon. We'll send it back to you.
Well, that's obvious. Bill Malugin, thanks so much for that. So this is just a cable news show. We never pretend that we're an international feminist organization. We're not an NGO. But that doesn't mean we don't care about the fate of women and girls. We do care. And that's why for months now we've been monitoring the situation in Congressman Eric Swalwell's office. Swalwell, you remember, had a long-time sexual affair with a Chinese spy that included personal behavior we will euphemistically describe as stomach-turning and unnatural. We'll leave it at that. Swalwell's spy girlfriend has since fled back to China ahead of the DOJ, but Eric Swalwell himself remains at large tonight in both Washington and California. We've been keeping tabs on him because we think it's our duty. A few months ago, we told you about Swalwell's efforts to find young women who might be willing to, quote, expand his brand, whatever that might mean. Just saying the words makes the hair on our arms stand up. Now tonight there is this development. Swalwell has been caught advertising for still more women. His office has posted a, quote, job listing, possibly on Craigslist, we can't be sure, noting that young women are, quote, strongly encouraged to join him, and we're quoting here, to manage his agenda. Verbatim quote. How'd you like your daughter managing Eric Swalwell's agenda? How is behavior like this allowed in 2021 in the United States Congress? Where's Nancy Pelosi? If this was Afghanistan, if it was happening in Kandahar, CNN would be demanding that these women, these agenda managers, receive immediate asylum for their own safety. UN agencies would get involved. We would all understand this as a pressing human rights crisis. But because Eric Swalwell is doing it, manage my agenda, it's okay? No, it's not okay. It's wrong. And we hope it stops immediately.
हेलो दोस्तों, अस्सलाम वालेकुम, वेलकम टू द नेट ऑन अपने यूट्यूब चैनल। दोस्तों, आज की इस वीडियो में मैं आपको बताने जा रहा हूँ OBS स्टूडियो की कुछ ऐसी सेटिंग्स, जो बेसिक सेटिंग्स जो आपको एक लाइव स्ट्रीम करने में कामयाब हो सकती हैं, जो आपको लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग करने के लिए ज़रूरत पड़ सकती है जिन सेटिंग्स की। तो वो मैं आज आपको बताने वाला हूँ, और साथ में आपको बेसिक तरीके से एक लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग करके भी दिखाऊंगा कि आप लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग किस तरह कर सकते हैं अपने यूट्यूब चैनल पर। बाकी रहा फेसबुक पर, वो भी मैं आपको बता दूंगा, ट्विटर पर, ट्विच पर, जो भी तरीक़ाकार है मैं सारा तरीक़ाकार आपको बता दूंगा कि किस तरह आप कर सकते हैं। फ़िलहाल मैं जो यूट्यूब पर, क्योंकि मेरा ज़्यादातर काम यूट्यूब पर है, और यूट्यूब पर ही मैं आपको बताने वाला हूँ कि यूट्यूब पर हमने लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग किस तरह करनी है। अगर किसी बंदे ने जानना है कि हम दूसरे फेसबुक पर या वेलकम बैक गाइस, जैसा कि आप लोग जानते हैं कि मैं आपको OBS स्टूडियो के ज़रिए जो बेसिक लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग है वो बताने वाला हूँ आज की वीडियो में। तो उसके लिए आपने सबसे पहले OBS स्टूडियो को इंस्टॉल कर लेना है। मैंने एक वीडियो इंस्टॉलेशन की भी बनाई हुई है, आप इंस्टॉल कर सकते हैं वीडियो के मुताबिक जिस तरह मैंने बताया हुआ है, और उसके बाद उसकी सेटिंग्स वगैरह कर लें। बाकी ये लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग के लिए जो OBS स्टूडियो का सॉफ्टवेयर है उसका लोगो इस तरह का होता है, तो हमने इसे कर लेना ओपन। ये ओपन हो गया। ओपन करने के बाद आपने ये देखें जी, पिछली वीडियो में मैंने आपको बताया था कि आपने सीन क्रिएट करने होते हैं। ये सब सीन है और ये देखें जी, ये वाला सब सीन है। ये दोनों, ये नंबर 1 वाले जो हैं इसके सब सीन है। ये नंबर 2 आ गया, इसमें मीडिया सोर्स, इसमें एक सब सीन है, तो इसमें 2 हैं। अब हमने इसको लाइव स्ट्रीम करना है, तो इसके लिए हमें क्या काम करना होगा। सबसे पहले हमने जाना है अपने यूट्यूब चैनल में, कोई उसका थंबनेल वगैरह सारा कुछ सेट करना है, तो वो मैं आपको बताता हूँ। मैं ओपन कर लेता हूँ अपना यूट्यूब चैनल, एक दफ़ा वीडियो को पॉज कर देता हूँ। तो ये मैंने अपना चैनल ओपन कर लिया। इसके लिए आपने यहाँ पर क्रिएट पर जाकर भी आप गो लाइव पर कर दे क्लिक, तब भी चल जाएगा काम, नहीं तो अदरवाइज़ यहाँ पर आप गो लाइव पर करेंगे क्लिक, और जैसे ही हम गो लाइव पर क्लिक करते हैं तो ये क्या, यूट्यूब लाइव फुल नेम ईमेल, ये क्या अब अपडेट हो गई है, मुझे लगता है अपडेट हो गई। एक दफ़ा हम इसे कर देते डिसमिस। इसे मैं कर लेता हूँ सेटिंग इसकी, कोई और चैनल कर लेते हैं लॉगिन। तो ये यहाँ से आपने लाइव करना है राइट नाउ। हमने तो अभी करनी है लाइव, हमने शेड्यूल तो नहीं लगाना। उसके लिए हम स्टार्ट पर करेंगे क्लिक, और सॉफ्टवेयर के ज़रिए हमने करनी है, तो कैमरा वगैरह नहीं चलाना। तो हम सॉफ्टवेयर के लिए करेंगे गो लाइव, गो पर क्लिक। ओ सॉरी, ये तो उसकी लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग ऑफ है, 24 घंटे के बाद होगी। चलें कोई और चैनल देख लेते हैं। तो ये मैंने चैनल ओपन कर लिया। अब यहाँ से हम गो लाइव पर करते हैं क्लिक। स्ट्रीम पर क्लिक किया और ये देखें जी, यहाँ पर हमने लाइव जो स्ट्रीम करनी है उसके लिए हमने पहले एडिट करना है। इसका टाइटल वगैरह इधर देना है, टाइटल वगैरह जो भी आपने वीडियो करनी है उसके रिलेटेड आपने टाइटल दे लेना है। मसलन ये मैंने टाइटल दे दिया। अब इसकी जो आपने डिस्क्रिप्शन वगैरह लिखनी है, अपनी मर्ज़ी से जो भी लिख लें डिस्क्रिप्शन। तो ये मैंने लिख दी डिस्क्रिप्शन। अब पब्लिक को हमने रखनी है, जाहिर सी बात है पब्लिक रखनी पड़ेगी। और कैटेगरी गेमिंग है, गेमिंग अगर हमने करनी तो कैटेगरी गेमिंग रखेंगे। अगर हमने कोई और चीज़ करनी है, मसलन मैं एजुकेशन कोई करना चाहता हूँ तो एजुकेशन कर लेता हूँ। और प्लेलिस्ट आपने बनानी है या नहीं है भी उन्होंने पूछ रहे हैं, तो वो आप इधर से बना कर सकते हैं। और यहाँ पर थंबनेल आ जाता है, थंबनेल में आप कोई सा भी थंबनेल लगा लें। कोई सा भी थंबनेल लगा लेते हैं, मसलन ये मैंने थंबनेल लगा लिया। अब हमने नीचे आ जाना थोड़ा सा, और यहाँ पर हमने लगा लेने टैग्स। अपनी वीडियो के रिलेटेड हमने जो टैग्स लगाने हैं वो लगा लेने हैं। टैग्स लगाने का क्या फ़ायदा होता है वो भी मैं आपको बताता चलूँ। टैग्स से आपकी वीडियो वायरल होने के ज़्यादा चांस होते हैं, और आपकी वीडियो फर्स्ट पेज पर शो होगी, तो इस फर्स्ट नंबर पर शो होगी, इसलिए टैग्स लगाने ज़रूरी होते हैं। तो टैग्स यहाँ पर आप लगा लें, उसके बाद लैंग्वेज वगैरह सेट कर लें। और ये सारी सेटिंग अपनी मर्ज़ी से आप कमेंटें ऑफ करना चाहते हैं वो भी कर सकते हैं। सारा कुछ करने के बाद सेव पर कर देना क्लिक, और यहाँ से ये जो स्ट्रीम की है इसे ऐसे ही आपने कर लेना है कॉपी। ध्यान में रहे इसे आपने ओपन नहीं करना। अगर जैसे ही आप ओपन कर लेंगे, अगर किसी ने देख लिया कि आपकी लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग की जो है वो कौन सी है, तो वो आपके चैनल पर भी लाइव कर सकता है और आपके चैनल को बहुत मसला बन सकता है बाद में, इसलिए इसको बचा के रखना चाहिए। मिनिमाइज किया मैंने और यहाँ से OBS स्टूडियो को ओपन किया। जाना है जी सेटिंग में जाने के बाद आपने स्ट्रीम पर करना है क्लिक, और स्ट्रीम पर ये पहले स्विच दिया हुआ है, इस पर आपने करना है जी यूट्यूब, ये वाला यूट्यूब। यहाँ पर आपने स्ट्रीम की दे देनी है एंड तो यहाँ पर आपने आई हैव सेव एंड अप्लाई करना है और ओके कर देना है। यहाँ पर हमने जो वीडियो चलाई हुई है वो हमने अब लाइव स्ट्रीम करनी है, तो हम पहले उसे कर लेते हैं। यहाँ से पहले स्ट्रीम की को शुरू कर लेते हैं। स्टार्ट स्ट्रीमिंग पर कर देते हैं क्लिक। जैसे ही हमने इधर क्लिक किया, अब आपने स्ट्रीम 2 पर क्लिक कर देना है। ये देखें जी, लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग हमारी बिल्कुल परफेक्ट हुई है। ग्रीन कलर के लोगो आपको दिखाई दे रहा होगा। अब हम जाते हैं अपने चैनल पर भी। ये देखें ये एक्सीलेंट कनेक्शन है। अभी हो जाते हैं लाइव स्ट्रीम। ये देखें जो वो उधर चलता जाएगा वो सारा कुछ इधर चलता जाएगा। दोस्तों मैं आपको एक बात बताता चलूँ कि ध्यान में रहे, अगर आप लाइव स्ट्रीम करना चाहते हैं और लाइव स्ट्रीम के ज़रिए एक और भी बात है कि लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग के ज़रिए आपका चैनल ग्रो जल्दी हो सकता है। ग्रो बहुत होता है लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग करने से, और लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग के लिए आपको इंटरनेट बहुत अच्छा चाहिए। अगर जितना अच्छा आपका इंटरनेट होगा उतना ही आपकी लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग क्लियर होगी। ये देखें जी, मेरा जो इंटरनेट पैकेज है वो 20 MB वाला पैकेज है, तो आप देख सकते हैं कि मजाल है कोई थोड़ा सा भी अटके हो। तो अगर हम कोई और नेट चला रहे हैं, मसलन जैज़ इंटरनेट या जोंग इंटरनेट, तो उन पर भी मसला आ जाता है। इसलिए आप कोई अच्छी कंपनी का इंटरनेट लगवा लें। जो लोग पाकिस्तान से, बाकी दूसरी कंट्रीज़ वाले तो अपनी कंट्री के हिसाब से लगवा सकते हैं इंटरनेट कनेक्शन। जो लोग पाकिस्तान से हैं उनके मैं बता रहा हूँ। तो ओके फ्रेंड्स, उम्मीद करता हूँ आपको ये बेसिक सेटिंग्स पसंद आई होंगी। अगर वीडियो अच्छी लगी है तो वीडियो को लाइक लाजमी कर देना, और जो लोग चैनल पर नहीं हैं तो सब्सक्राइब भी लाजमी कर देना। ओके फ्रेंड्स, मिलेंगे हम नेक्स्ट वीडियो में। नेक्स्ट वीडियो तक दीजिए मुझको इजाज़त। अल्लाह हाफिज़। यहाँ से मैं इसे कर देता हूँ जी एंड स्ट्रीम।